Well, I think one of the main things that I try to remind people is that you need to also put yourself as a customer of your business, right? So if you're so busy helping your customers do their work that you are not invoicing your customers, you're not going to be bringing in the cash, right? And the longer that you wait to invoice them, the less important your customer is going to think that that payment is to you.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Campfire Capitalism. I'm your host, Desmond Dixon. And today you just have me, no Heather, no Josh, but we do have another awesome guest. And this one is going to be a great one because we are going to talk about some money. We're going to talk about some mistakes to avoid. We're going to talk about profitability. We're going to talk about cash flow. We're going to talk about all the juicy things that you need in order to squeeze every bit of success out of your business. So I'm super excited today to really introduce this amazing woman. Her name is Candy Messer, and she is a profitability and growth advisor working with entrepreneurs and service-based industries to help them have successful businesses. With experience in bookkeeping industry since 1998, Candy understands the stresses business owners face, offers customized services to meet their varied needs. Her company energizes business owners by removing the burden of compliance tasks, as well as working with them to identify issues preventing higher profitability and growth. As a result of using her services, clients have peace of mind and the freedom to do what they love. Candy is also a co-author of A Business Success with Ease, released in 2013, and Navigating Entrepreneurship, released in 2014, and is the host of the Biz Help For You podcast, which can be found on YouTube, as well as multiple podcast channels. Thanks for coming, Candy. I'm really grateful for you to be here today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. So we like to start off every episode with hey, how did Candy become Candy? And tell us a little about your journey, in about 5 or 6 minutes.
Sure. Well, I never thought I would be a business owner, to be honest. I went to school, I took business management, but I started in retail when I was 17. I had stayed there for almost 10 years. But after having my second child, and I just thought, the hours are crazy and I want to be able to be, with my children. And it didn't make sense to really pay for childcare for 2. And then, all the other stuff, pay taxes on the money I was going to earn and come home with maybe like $5,000 a year at the end of it all. So I was an at-home mom for 3 years. And at one point I was called because there was a preschool that the director was on a medical leave, and the person that had filled in for her had found another job when the director came back, but then the director had the same medical issue and was going to be gone probably for another 6 months. And so somebody recommended me and said, well, Candy knows numbers and, she's good at that. And my kids at the time were 4.5 and 2.5. So it was perfect. I could literally take the kids with me to the job, do the work that I needed to do. And after that 6-month period was over and the director came back, I thought, well, maybe I'll, go back to school and maybe I'll do the same thing, go into a preschool. I enjoyed, being with kids and everything. But over time, it just opportunities came my way. So I ended up working in a publishing company as a full charge bookkeeper, handling every aspect of the company, basically. And after having done that for many years, somebody knew what I was doing again and said, my husband has a business. I hate reconciling the books. I will invoice the customer. I will pay the bills, but I don't even want to look at the reconciliations. Will you help me? And I wasn't sure I really wanted to do that, So I was putting it off for a bit, and she kept asking me. And I thought, well, if I have to get a business license, and at home where I was living at the time, you had to have a home operating permit as well. I was like, I'm not going to make any money by the time I pay the fees, right? And so I looked for a few more clients while I had my quote unquote real job, on the side. And I did both. So I would go to client locations for, these few clients once or twice a month, help them with the things they needed, do my regular job. And the job started changing. They'd hired some new management, and it was becoming a little less, enjoyable, to be there. And my husband finally said, why don't you just do what you love, do your business, help the customers, and you're great at it, right? And so I was scared. Like if anyone has been in that position, like I had a guaranteed paycheck, right? I knew I was going to work certain hours. I was going to come home with a certain amount of money, and it was now going to be up to me if I did my own thing. But he encouraged me to do it. And so basically in 2004, I left my job. 2005, I opened an office, renamed my business because now I was actually like in a location. I wasn't just home based. And then in 2006, hired my first employee. And now here we are, 2022, right? So many years later, and it's been amazing. And it's enjoyable to help customers with the things they generally have to do in their business, but they don't want to, but also providing employment to many people that are almost like family, right? You know, I know they say you should not consider like your employees family, but we are very close in the company, and I enjoy giving them opportunities for growth and, you know, being able to have that employment that, you know, that it just really helps our community too.
Oh man, I love the accidental entrepreneurial stories, like where you have a skill that's in demand, people see that you're good at it, and then you just get pulled into this path. And then once the momentum goes, like it's like off to the races at that point. So I'm a sales guy, so I have to ask you this question. Like, how did you get your first clients? Because you mentioned that one person asked you, you did the numbers, which is important. Businesses just get math. You looked at, okay, here's my bare expenses in terms of being compliant in the state that I'm in. Here is the revenue that's essentially a wash, and you knew that you needed to get more clients. So then you became an entrepreneur, solved your problem. So talk to me, like, how did you get your first clients when you first started?
Sure.
Right.
So like I said, obviously the first one came to me and said, please help. Right. And after that, I was like, okay, I need to have, you know, some clients. So I was also on the PTA at my children's school, and I happened to know that one of the people there was also a bookkeeper. So I approached her and just happened to say, you know what, I'm kind of going out on my own, and do you have any tips or anything that could help me? And she said, you know what, I have a client that I really can't handle anymore. She needs more attention than I can give her. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. So she introduced me. That client actually had two kind of co-related businesses that did take a lot of work. And so that was one of the ones that came to me. And then I believe I told my CPA actually that I was looking to start this business. And so he had given me a client or two. And it was over time, it was really the relationships that I have built where people knew kind of what I was doing. It might have been somebody who served the same client even. It might have been like a business banker, or I had a few that were mortgage brokers that they needed to have profit and loss reports from their potential, you know, customers who were refinancing, and their books weren't really put together well. So they'd say, could you please help them get them the information that they need so we can fund their loan? So it's things like that that definitely helped bring clients those first few years. And then over time, again, it's just I've been a member of my local chamber. I've been a member of, you know, some of the networking groups, and I've been in leadership as well. So I was, you know, the vice president, the treasurer, the president of quite a few organizations. And so I think that helps too, because people see you, get to know you, get to trust you, and then they're comfortable referring.
Oh man, I think there's so many lessons in what you just said, like so many gold nuggets. I think the first thing, which I feel like has been a pattern with all the amazing people coming on the pod, has been the power of networking and also finding people with similar clients and then creating win-win scenarios for everyone. Like you mentioned, the mortgage broker. Like, wow, how many mortgage brokers are there there's so many mortgage brokers. And so you help them with their clients because they want their clients to be, you know, more likely to be approved. Obviously, you win because you build a new relationship and you get to show your value. And then the end user wins because then they get to refinance their home, and then they also have someone who's professional in their back pocket who can handle their finances in the future.
Exactly.
Man, it's so good. That's so good. So let's go here now because this is super interesting. So you've been in this game for a long time. Right? Like you've built this organization, you have employees, right? You've seen it all. You also see a lot of different books. You see a lot of patterns in successful entrepreneurs. I'm super interested to know this. Like, what are some like common mistakes that you see business owners make when because you see the money coming in, the money coming out, right? So what's some of those common mistakes that you see pretty often?
Sure. Well, and there are mistakes that are specifically bookkeeping related, and there are some that are like business related as well that are kind of intermingled that we see. But I think one thing is, and I understand when people are starting a business, they're concerned about cash. And so they want to do it themselves. But a lot of people don't understand accounting or what is the chart of accounts, what should be expense versus what's a liability. What's the difference between cash flow and profit? And so I think that's one of the biggest things is not understanding that especially a sole proprietor, if you're drawing money out of the business to live on, which is why you have a business a lot of times too, right? That money that you're taking out and living off of is the profit that the business generated. And the IRS is going to expect you to pay tax on that money. And so someone came to me many years ago now at one point when she got an IRS notice that she owed a pretty decent amount of money. And so she was trying to find someone to help her understand what was going on. And she's like, I don't understand. I don't have any money in the bank. How can they say that I owe them this much money? And I had to explain to her that you lived off the profit, but the profit is taxable and you didn't put anything aside to actually pay for taxes. And so I think that's one thing people don't think of is that I need to plan for that. And kind of along with that, also is estimated tax payments. So as we all know, when we're an employee, right, taxes come out of your check depending on how you're claiming. But if you're making enough money and how you're claiming, you're going to have income tax withheld from your paycheck. And your employer is basically sending that ahead of time to the IRS prior to, or the state, prior to your filing a return. So you're filing the return the year after that you've earned that money. But you basically pay every week or every 2 weeks or however often, your payroll is throughout the year. Well, when you own a business, and especially if you're not able to be on payroll, then you are supposed to be making those estimated tax payments. And those are due generally 4 times a year. Again, depending on your situation, if you don't have profit, you don't have a lot, you may not have to make a payment, but most businesses should be making a payment in January, which is the final payment for the prior year, April, June, and September. So you're expected to be making those tax payments throughout the year to kind of prepay for those liabilities. You're not supposed to wait till you file. If you wait till you file, you might find a surprise that they're going to penalize you as well. So I think that's sometimes people just don't understand these are the things they're supposed to be doing, but the government is going to say, even if you didn't know, that's the rule. Sorry, here you go. So it's sad to see when that happens.
Oh man, okay. That's so good because, man, let's talk a little bit more about the cash flow side, because I think that there's a story there in terms of like, yes, you got to say, you have to put money to the side to pay off the sale, right? Like it's a thing. What like business decisions do you see like in relation to cash flow? Because cash flow is like the oxygen, not only for your personal life in order to pay your bills and pay for your lifestyle, but also for your business to grow or, maintain. So like, what are some, common mistakes you see in terms of like cash flow decisions within a business? I'm pretty interested to hear this.
Well, I think one of the main things that I try to remind people is that you need to also put yourself as a customer of your business, right? So if you're so busy helping your customers do their work that you are not invoicing your customers, you're not going to be bringing in the cash, right? And the longer that you wait to invoice them, the less important your customer is going to think that payment is to you. So they might even delay paying. You might say, once you finally send an invoice, it's due right away or it's due in 15 days. But they might think, well, they waited 2 or 3 months to invoice me. It's obviously not important. I'll get to it when I get to it. So I tell customers, whether you invoice after a job is finished, if it's something on a specific day of the month, as long as you have a system for yourself that on these certain dates, this is when I'm going to do my invoicing or when the project is completed, or, maybe you take 20% down and then you have a progress payment for another 30%. And when the job is complete, it's 50%. It really depends on the industry, the service that you're providing. But you need to put yourself basically on the schedule, because if you don't, you're going to run out of cash and you can't pay your own bills. The other thing that I think I see a lot of times is people will sign up for things that are on like a regular subscription, a monthly subscription, and they might not be using those services as much anymore, but it's kind of in the back of their mind. They don't think about all these expenses that they're paying, or they're thinking, oh, it's $14.99 a month. It's not that much, right? But you multiply that by a few and you're not using the services, you're paying money that you don't need to. So sitting down and really looking at some of your expenses periodically to say, do I really need this? And there's also a difference between need and want, right? So sometimes you're paying for things you really don't need and you really shouldn't be spending money on because you need to be saving that for something else. But really looking at your expenses, what can you reduce if necessary? Things sometimes are fixed, right? You can't do much about the rent when you're in a lease, and if you have terms, and insurance, there are certain things, that we can't control. But yet again, in insurance, you might be able to increase a deductible, which will reduce the price. So really just sitting down and looking at what are you spending your money on and paying attention to your numbers. There's a lot of people that will just look at the balance in the bank and think, well, I have money in the bank, but they don't really know if they're profitable or not. Because again, as we said, money and profit, that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. So it's really understand what your books show you, really look at the financial reports. And if you're overwhelmed, I know there's a lot of people that are afraid because they don't know what the numbers actually mean. Go ahead and have a consultation with someone like me or others out there that can at least give you the expertise to say, this is what these reports mean, and make sure that they're posting things correctly. Because again, if you don't post something correctly, it can throw off the numbers and you might think that you're more profitable than you really are.
Man, so much to unpack there. I'm super curious to kind of get your take on, so you mentioned like making sure you're keeping an eye on your expenses, being mindful of those things. Also being mindful of the difference between money and profit and making sure that the numbers that you're making your decisions off of are correct, right? Which now moves me into the next area, which is, when you see, everyone who's probably listening to this podcast is ambitious, right? We all are capitalists. We all believe in creating more value, making more money, right? And so in making more money, you essentially sell either more stuff, charge higher prices, so save more things to the same people. And so when you see entrepreneurs or business owners like try to grow aggressively, right? What are some things that you see, common mistakes that you see that, they make, through growth? It doesn't need to be too aggressive, but when that, okay, I have a couple of clients, I know people who are like really trying to grow aggressively, like what are some common mistakes or patterns that you normally see?
Sure. Well, sometimes you could be trying to grow too fast, right? If you don't have things in place to support that growth, you need to have systems and processes and staff and, all of these things kind of worked out. But I understand too that there's good debt and bad debt too. So, if you're going to be spending a lot of money on credit cards and paying interest and those kind of things too, that's not ideal, right? You don't want to be paying money that you don't have to. But there are some that are afraid to take on any debt at all, and that limits your growth. So if you're planning on growing and you need another piece of equipment and that's $50,000, it might be a good idea to get a loan for that $50,000, right? Instead of trying to scrape up the cash, or even if you have it in the bank, if you spend it all on that piece of equipment, but then you don't bring in what you expect, now you're going to have a hard time for paying the expenses that you have. So if that equipment is going to help you generate more revenue, it's actually an asset that is helping you grow rather than a liability that you just, have this loan. So I think you really need to look at that kind of thing as well to make sure that you're making those wise decisions. And again, don't use debt that is expensive. There's some things, it really pains me when I find out that later on somebody was having some cash flow issues and they go to one of these like companies that say, well, we'll take the funds out of your credit card every time you process every day. Well, if you look at what they're taking and the fees that they're taking, sometimes it could be 30% of what you're, getting from them. So that's not a good deal, right? So really look at what you're getting yourself into and what is the true cost and what is the benefit. So if it's going to help you drive sales, that's great. Another thing is often profitability drops when they're trying to grow. And if you know that that's going to happen for a shorter period of time and then you're going to be able to turn it around, that's okay. But a lot of times when you're trying to grow, you are expending a lot more than you maybe thought you would, and your profitability continues to reduce. So if you're looking just at the top line number and, oh, great, like we've got more revenue. Well, that's true. Yes, you've got more revenue, but what is the effect on your profit? And is it worth that extra effort to have the profit that you're getting? And so top line number is great, but really look at that bottom line and make sure that what you're doing is making sense.
Oh man, I can't tell you how many times I've seen entrepreneurs like pay for ads or pay for customer acquisition channels and the buy sales essentially, but don't get an adequate return on that investment.
Right.
And then on top of that, usually the rule of thumb that we're all taught is you leverage debt to grow, right? In terms of loans or credit cards, whatever. And so if you're not making the same amount of money to pay for that, not only the amount of money you borrow, but also to pay for that, and then also to pay for the systems and the operations you need to fulfill it, then you're literally creating this muck and a lot of financial pressure in the business. And it's very scary, right? And something I want to segment into this is lifetime value of clients is also radically important. So and also the cadence of that sales cycle or of that cash flow, right? And also you never know what will come down the road. For instance, I'll be completely transparent. I love being super real on this pod. I took some risk personally in all areas. I'm doing investing, I'm doing, my business. And I thought one area of my business was safe, right? Because I couldn't take any more clients. I had decent cash flow. I'm pretty much leveraging the cash in this business to pay for things like this podcast, funding my travel around the world. And I decided to take a risk in order to make some more investments in more speculative things. And then what do you know? Within 45 days, Candy, 45 days, when I say almost everything you thought could go wrong went wrong, right? You have the stock market going down, you have the crypto market going down. I had a real estate tenant, a tenant not pay a bill, right? Evicted tenant, right? So now I have to pay a mortgage. One of my highest clients, dollar clients, the business is pretty much about to implode because of some managerial decisions, right? I mean, outside of my control, and I had to cut that contract, right? And so I'm like, man, I'm taking a hit in my business. I just lost cash flow in my business. I just took a cash flow hit in my in real estate. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's all coming. It's the all at once, and it's paying off. Then you also have personal debt, right? So then I took some risk in terms of debt. It's in short term, thinking that I got 3 months to pay it, 3 months to get it. So now I'm like, oh man, now I have to figure all this stuff out and get through, the next few months, right? And so I wanted to share this lesson on the pod. I think you're a perfect guest to share this with us because you don't know what you don't know, and you do have to take risk. And also, I think you mentioned in terms of debt, I think understanding the game theory or the mental modeling around taking out debt and understanding cash flow is very critical. And sometimes you don't know until you actually experience it. Yes, you can go through it, but you got to have those battle scars, right? Because there's so many entrepreneurs who go bankrupt or, lose everything, but then they bounce back because they learn from those situations. So I'm very curious. That's the segue into my next part that I want to talk to you about is, have you talk to me about some of those entrepreneurs or business owners that you've seen, or if you have seen that went through some type of financial ruin? You don't have to give, obviously, protect confidentiality. I just want to understand the mindset of seeing these people take an L, take a loss, because you've been in the game a long time. You've probably seen the 2008 crisis or 2009 crisis. How did you see those business owners bounce back? How was their mental? Yeah.
I have one particular client that had a restaurant, And he had wanted to like run a food truck as well. And so he couldn't be obviously in two places at one time. So he was having someone else kind of take care of the restaurant while he did the food truck. Well, that person basically stole the business from him. I mean, it was really sad. And it was hard for him to prove his case because he didn't have funds to fight the issue. And they probably knew that too, because he'd put everything into this food truck and he was running the food truck. And so he basically kind of lost that business. And so then he was doing his food truck. And a few years later, he thought, okay, I'm going to open another restaurant, and he needed some investment. And so two friends of his came in and invested, and, I think the downside that I saw of that, and I tried to tell all of them, you are trying to get paid back too fast. So they basically were going to open in July, and they were expecting to get a decent sum back on their investment starting 2 months later. And when I tried to point out to them, do you know how much revenue you have to generate to pay the operating expenses that you're going to have for your restaurant, including your food costs and your payroll and other things? You're not going to have enough to pay yourself back. And if you're going to hold to that agreement, you're not going to be able to operate. And they didn't listen, right? And started taking the cash out of the business, saying, nope, our agreement is we're going to get paid back this much. And that business did not last a year, and they ran out of cash. And I think that's the part where you have kind of short-sightedness when you're looking at investing in a business. You can't expect to get everything back in a very short period of time, especially if you're starting a business up again. It's another thing if it's been running for a long time and maybe you're investing in the business and you're going to have a return quicker. But you really have to plan that if you're investing in something, especially if it's going to start up, you need to think that it's going to take longer than maybe you anticipate to really get that back. And if you're willing to stick it out, and really make the business work, often, I can't say all the time, of course, because we know things don't work out the way you plan all the time, but if you're willing to let the money be in the business to help it operate, you'll probably get that investment. And one of those issues I see when we were talking about mistakes business owners make too is not always taking everything into consideration for their costs to really understand what it's going to cost them to run their business. And so when I talk to someone who's thinking of starting a business and say, okay, well, create a budget. What do you think you're going to bring in revenue? What do you think you're going to have as expenses? And then I say, okay, now cut those expenses, cut the income, right? You maybe aren't going to make as much as you think as quickly as you are hoping to, but increase those expenses because there's probably things you're not thinking about, or, there's other costs that are going to maybe increase that you hadn't planned on. And if it doesn't happen that way, great. You're still in a better financial, you've got more money in, you've got less expenses. But if you really do what I say and cut what you think your income is going to be and increase what your expenses are going to be, you're going to have a more realistic picture of what it may take to get that business going.
That's super practical. It's really, really, really practical. Man, this is so good. I really appreciate this. So, what's something that you would love to share with the audience that, could be, you covered a lot here, but, what would be something that you'd like to leave with everyone that's like, can give them a quick win or get them in the right direction? Like, what's something that you can give them real quick?
Well, I would say if you were an employer and you're not the only person on payroll, but you had another employee that's not family or something too. If you haven't already looked at if you qualify for the employer retention tax credits that are available, look at that, because that can help your cash flow too. And for those who aren't aware of what that is, most people probably know, but I'll just give a quick little background on that too, is the employer retention tax credit is money that you can claim for maintaining payroll for your staff if you had a couple qualifying factors. In 2020, the qualifying factor was if you look at a particular quarter in 2020 and the revenue that you had compared to the same quarter in 2019, if you had a 50% or greater loss, then you could qualify. And if you had a partial or mandatory government shutdown, so, for instance, restaurants couldn't have indoor dining, or you had to have like social distancing. So people had less capacity that they were able to serve customers, or, dental offices had to shut down for a few weeks because you couldn't have aerosols and things like that. So if you were impacted at all by not being able to perform the services, then you didn't have to have that 50% reduction. You could still qualify. In 2021, they made it a little easier. And I didn't actually quote the amount you can get, but for 2020, for an employee up to $10,000 of qualified wages, you could get a 50% credit. So $5,000 max per employee. In 2021, they changed it to you only had to have a 20% reduction in income compared to the same quarter in 2019 or that mandatory shutdown. And then they added for the third and fourth quarters of 2021, recovery startup businesses. So if you began your business after February 15th, 2020, you don't even have to have those requirements of shutdown or reduction of income. You automatically qualify. So again, if you had other people on payroll, not a majority owner, not related family, you could potentially qualify for a decent amount of cash for that per quarter that you qualify for. So look into that. I actually have videos on my YouTube channel that show how to complete those forms so you can get the credits at no fees that you have to pay anyone to do it. Of course, if anyone wants our help, we are available to help as well. But that is something that a lot of people still haven't filed for that they could qualify for.
Oh man, I'm about to go on YouTube so that the show's over. I'm about to file taxes next week. So yeah, that's really good to know. Like that was fire. This was awesome. So if everyone wants to find you, because you're obviously super knowledgeable. This was awesome. Like what's the best way to kind of get a hold of you here?
Sure. Well, my website is www, of course, .abandp.com. It's short for Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll. And then I do have a Facebook business page, also Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll, LinkedIn, Candy Messer. I mentioned the YouTube channel as well, and that's under Candy Messer. And then I have, again, my own podcast as well called Biz Help For You. And then I also share like video tips and tricks and things like that too, which is where they'll find those employer retention tax credit videos. And then my office number, 310-534-5577.
Boom. And we will include all of those wonderful links in the show notes. So guys, check it out. And this was so cool. So I really appreciate you for coming on and sharing some value with us today.
Sure. I appreciate being invited. Thank you.
Boom. So guys, we've made it to the end. We just had a jam-packed episode of tons of value from Miss Candy here. So don't forget to give us that beautiful rating and review. We're sending some comments, sending some questions. Don't forget to click those links. If you want to come on the pod and play with us, if you're an entrepreneur or business owner out there, just go to campfirecapitalism.com/guest, and we'll love to play with you on the show. This was awesome, and we'll see you soon. Bye.